Hello, everyone, and welcome to our GI Huddle interview with the Innovation Group. Today, we'll be discussing the evolving gaming industry ecosystem, and we're going to start off with Michael Soll. Hi, Michael. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Tim. So I think we're really happy to have this opportunity today to talk a little bit about the industry from our perspective, which is over the Innovation Group has been involved in the industry for almost 3 decades now. And our company's maturation has kind of happened at the same pace as the industry, and the milestones that the industry has faced have obviously played into how we've structured the business and the type of work we're involved in. So we thought that today Brian Wyman, who's my partner based in Las Vegas, and myself, that we would use our own trajectory and the industry's history to kind of get us to a more productive conversation on where we are today, where the industry is today, kind of where it's headed.
And
so,
I was going to say, Brian, thanks for joining us as well. And yeah, just an intro from you to start as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us, Tim. And as Michael said, my name is Brian Wyman. I'm Michael's partner at the Innovation Group. And the reason that I'm here, and it's not just Michael, is while Michael and I work very closely together, I think we think about the industry quite differently because we come at it from very different backgrounds. Michael's background has been in finance and in development on the operator side, on the analyst side, and then in our advisory role for the last several years. And I come into the industry as an outsider with a background in mathematics, computer science. I worked on an operating team when I first entered the industry, and so I come from the defense industry, the finance industry, into gaming, and so I bring a pretty different view. Where Michael has a much more developed view of the M&A landscape and development. I think more about operations, new technology, highly targeted direct marketing, casino floor optimization. I spend a lot of my time in sports betting and iGaming in this emerging technology landscape. So we're thrilled to have the opportunity to both share our perspectives with you guys today.
Yeah, we're very happy to have you, and it sounds like we're going to have a lot of expertise and experience coming from you guys on the industry as a whole, and it's great to look at it kind of with this. I'm not sure if helicopter view is the right phrase, but certainly looking at an overview, modern gaming, and a very historical kind of perspective. Michael, it'd be great to go back to you now and to kind of start and talk about what defined the gaming industry. I guess from a key moment is between the opening of the Mirage in 1989 and through the 1990s.
Yeah, so that timing really coincides with when our company entered the industry. Just by way of a background, we started as transportation planners and civil engineers, and as the emerging markets outside of Nevada and New Jersey started to open up, they needed site planning, but people really didn't know what they were planning for. So we took the opportunity, and my original partner, Steve Ritvo, who was a traffic engineer, started to learn about who comes to casinos, how long do they stay, how much do they spend. That kind of got us into the feasibility business. But when the Mirage was opened in 1989, and we had our first, what we call today the integrated resort, of course, but we had our first destination resort that really had a focus on amenities and entertainment and excitement off the casino floor. It really started what we would define as the modern gaming industry today. But that first decade was very focused on transitioning from traditional Las Vegas families into corporations. There were IPOs for small regional operators, riverboats at the time, tribal management companies, of course, tribes getting into gaming. And although the buildings they were building, or the properties they were building, had varying degrees of gaming focus versus amenity focus, we started to see a corporate structure emerge from really what was a Las Vegas family style owned business for many years. And at the same time, we saw kind of the initial stages of the disaggregation of the hotel industry and the casino industry. Companies like Hilton, you remember, ITT Sheraton, they had tremendous gaming assets. And we started to see, particularly from the equity analyst side, splitting up these companies so that we could maximize multiples on either side. So that really started to define gaming companies as gaming-centric platforms, kind of across the board. The next series of changes were the very early stages of customer engagement. We have these new markets, we're expanding, and we started to have the earliest sense of the value of player relationships in gaming and marketing power. And I'm going to have Brian talk about that, but if you think about the physical property was becoming more diverse, more things to do, more things to bring people to the property. The customer engagement side was starting to learn and be able to rely on new technologies. And this really started the trajectory that brings us to where some of the modern technologies landed today. So if we just take loyalty, Brian, because you've been thinking about it most of the time you've been involved in the industry, how do you see that as a turning point?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, right? Loyalty programs, I would say, and thematically, just sticking with the 1990s here, we were really just starting to see the emergence of player tracking. And, I think you didn't see a real shift into the more modern loyalty programs until you see total rewards emerge, in the next decade. But at this time, the industry is it's starting to have loyalty cards. It's starting to track play. It's starting to get away from the old kind of Binion style of reinvestment in players, which is come, eat, stay, and it's much more targeted. And likewise, we're getting into an era here where the player is becoming more sophisticated, right? They understand the system and they understand how to try to take better advantage of the offerings that the casino has. And so I think, this shift in marketing and loyalty marketing is really the first use of technology for ensuring that the business is long-term stable and the margins are going to be where Wall Street needs them to be and so on. But I think there's a lot more to say about loyalty programs in the next decade, really, than in this decade.
Yeah, and then the only other thing to kind of tie up the first decade, there were ongoing technologies that supported the industry logically that became much more powerful later, like access to cash on site and systems that allowed credit to be, and we'll talk about that. But the other thing that was going on was a global recognition of the industry as an industry. So while a lot of what we're talking about now, particularly on the corporate side, is North America centric, smart money started to look out at the world and say, what's gaming like in Asia, and what's Macau all about, and what's gaming like in Europe? The smaller hotel based casino product, and who owns these properties, and what's going on in Latin America. And of course, many jurisdictions hadn't opened up yet. So the global awareness started then, and that's kind of a theme that we'll carry through. But I think that's yeah.
Sorry, Michael. Yeah, no, I was going to say, in addition, I mean, even just domestically, it's hard to believe this when you think about the calendar, but I mean, the early 1990s is I believe when MGM Grand launched, and so you're starting to see now, the integration of media companies, of big brands coming into gaming, that existed at a small level, but this is really a turning point, I think, in the industry.
Absolutely, yes. So, I mean, we've covered the 1990s sort of quite well there. And when we talked about loyalty programs, I mean, just to throw in our Global Gaming Awards, we have a whole category, dedicated to customer loyalty programs themselves. So certainly that would have been a big turning point in the industry. Somewhat anecdotal, but also at the end of the film Casino, it's I know this isn't exactly it's more entertainment than history, but so they talk about kind of, that's it for the old owners of casino. It's all it's big business in Las Vegas now. So as I say, we've talked 1990s quite a couple of sort of big themes and turning points there. What kind of market and technological trends influence gaming when we talk about the early 21st century? So moving forward, and Brian, can I come to you with this one?
Yeah, well, I think we've talked a little bit about loyalty programs, and obviously the major innovation in marketing there is the advent of total rewards, and the idea that you can bring a Harvard Business School professor in to be the CEO of a gaming company, and that the data matters. And so I'm a technologist and I'm a scientist, and so obviously this speaks perfectly to me. But this is really an innovative idea in the industry. The idea that, hey, it doesn't have to be broad-based marketing; it can be highly targeted. And I think even today we're developing these technologies to be, instead of many to one, starting to get into more one-to-one marketing. I think the early 2000s and to 2010, you have a few things going on. Obviously, the loyalty programs, as we've discussed, you start to see in line with the loyalty programs coming in and the use of data, the use of analytics, the use of data-driven decision-making processes, and we start to really get to the questions that are philosophical but still around the industry today about short-term revenue gains and long-term equity of the brand. And the examples I'm thinking about here are the advent of resort fees, which I think came more in the 2010s if they didn't emerge in the late 2000s. But the idea of you can do analysis and balance out, what does this really mean in terms of how quickly we can pick up revenue versus what it does to our not just the casino brand, but the whole industry's brand. And so I think resort fees, parking fees, improved slot technology. If you look at hold on slot machines throughout the early 2000s, I mean, it's a straight line going up. And this changes the game dynamics and the play for players. And you're coupling the higher hold with improved technology that's making the machine spin faster and faster. And so, you start to have these questions of customer experience that you didn't have when it was just, pull the handle and the real spin and, 777, that kind of thing. Additionally, I think in the 2000s, you start to see a major shift in at least Las Vegas, but really industry-wide. With the incorporation of a broader amenity set. And I think really, the Mirage teed this up for everybody else, but you see it come about in a big way with, MGM's acquisition of Mirage, which is right around 2000, I believe. And you start to see these amenity sets start to grow around the industry. Michael, is there something you want to add here?
Yeah, but on amenities, just to expand that a little bit, we also had the Venetian arrive on the scene and start to bring, through LVS, the convention business into gaming in a big way. So, we call that a super amenity. And we also started to see in the regional markets, which started out like older Vegas properties, right? Very gaming centric, 5 to 10% of revenue being non-gaming revenue, to start to play with larger hotel blocks, their own meeting space, amenities. We start to see properties emerge in places like Temecula with the Pachanga Band, along the Gulf Coast in Mississippi. So capital is starting to be deployed. And then internationally, people are waking up. What's happening in the US on bricks and mortar resorts, and are there other places in the world where we can maximize it? And of course, Macau became a logical target for a transition from a traditional market to a mega market. But not to weigh down the conversation with amenities, there are also a couple of other things that were starting to emerge at the end of that period. Cashless play was getting there, so we started to see less dependence on cash carry, and the ability for ticket in, ticket out was just starting to emerge. And then on the corporate side, we started to see equipment manufacturers and gaming operators in a gray area around things like distributed systems and tracking systems and casino management systems and POS on the non-gaming amenities. And so what you have is a mix of companies that are providing products that overlap, who can address customers and gather data in overlapping ways. And it really opened up the field. At the same time, we were opening up the structure of the industry. Private equity started to come in and take a look. And let's not forget that the Great Recession, we were moving into the Great Recession already at this point. And we started to see the bailout, really, of the companies that had been so successfully through their IPOs in the early part of this period start to look at ways out through leveraged buyouts. And of course, it didn't take long for that trend to reverse itself, but that's what was going on. And I think those are kind of the key factors that get us through that decade. And
Michael, I mean, we haven't talked about the emergence of regional gaming markets in a big way, and I think several of the topics that we've covered have been very Las Vegas centric, with a nod to some worldwide development. But I think the advent of gaming in a more convenient way, not necessarily in a distributed systems way, but in regional markets, I think as states opened up around this time frame, it sort of changed the view that Las Vegas had of itself, as instead of the sole provider or the sole, along with Atlantic City, provider of gaming opportunities in the U.S. Now Las Vegas really had to market itself, brand itself as a destination, and that gave rise to a completely different viewpoint of what should a destination resort and casino look like.
Ironically, when I was in the hot seat on the private equity side, as this was unrolling, people were worried about Vegas. They actually thought that regional gaming revenue would cannibalize Las Vegas, and of course, we all know it went in the other direction. It became the holy grail, the place to visit. But yeah, I just think on Brian's point on regionalization, we were well regionalized at this point. More states had gaming than didn't have gaming. Many tribes had developed. Canada was on a roll, and riverboats were going landside. A lot of the ways that we got into gaming indirectly through converting parimutuel facilities and through putting boats on water really took a back seat, and we started to progress the industry that would be productive in its own right and legitimate without having to work around rules and regulations to safeguard, the consumer.
So you guys have talked about some key sort of recurring themes, a couple of big decades for gaming, but obviously gaming has changed so much in this time. The periods you've covered, looking at gaming today, I mean, in the last decade or so, there would have been even more change. And so the next sort of topic, and Brian, if we start with you again, this would be great on this one. What defines the gaming industry as we know it today? And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but perhaps we can talk maybe before the pandemic, because obviously that's something we'll arrive at later on.
Yeah, well, I think, you'd be hard pressed to find anybody that would answer this question without leading with sports betting. Obviously 2018 was an absolutely massive year in the United States with the repeal of PASPA. But it wasn't just that sports betting was legal. Because it wasn't U.S. casinos just flipping a switch and turning on sports betting and okay, we have another form of gaming. I mean, this really opened up collaboration between companies worldwide, and you see, now companies, European companies in particular, that had limited interest in the U.S. markets prior to 2018, coming in, cutting deals with U.S. companies. I think there's a lot more. I don't know if globalization is the right word, but I think that there's a lot more international collaboration, and we see a lot of learnings from something that Europe's been doing for decades, and which exists in at least a gray form worldwide, and has for decades. So I think one is sports betting for sure. I guess hand in hand with sports betting is really an emphasis today on preparing for a future of online gaming, of iGaming. I think that, in a way, the industry was a little bit surprised. I mean, we had been planning for it, for the potential of sports betting coming in 2018, but I don't think that we were as ready as we could have been for it. I mean, and you can see that in markets today where deals are still being kind of cobbled together and market access isn't clear, and states are pushing legislation through at in a record pace in some cases. All of a sudden there's a political will to do it, and we hit the go button and we put together some legislation. So, I mean, I think that the industry is looking forward a little bit right now toward online gaming being, the next sports betting, so to speak, the next new wave of gaming. I think, there's also a pretty interesting focus right now on the leveraging of data, and my perspective again is coming at this from, again, a technologist, a scientist, and somebody who focuses on these type of things daily. But I do think that every time conferences come up, there's a discussion of, okay, what's the current state of AI, and what does it look like in the future, and how are we really leveraging this player marketing data? I know we collect it all; we're excellent at collecting it, but how are we using it to drive margin? I think, I guess we focused or we're focusing right now on pre-COVID. So maybe I'll say a little bit more about margin in a few minutes when we get to the COVID discussion. But, I think that we're seeing more and more, in the same way that we're collecting slot data and collecting table games data, trying to evaluate overall profitability of our guests, both on the gaming side and the non-gaming, the resort side of the business, and trying to develop this 360-degree blueprint, while we're seeing a lot of folks push the envelope in terms of what they can do with this marketing data.
I think when you look at that, these new tools and these new approaches, they address something else that's happening, which is saturation. We've got the markets are becoming more and more competitive. They're filling in. But, just one more comment on online and sports betting. We reversed the trend. It was really the international markets, in Europe in particular, that fed the more advanced states of play in online and sports betting, and imported them to the U.S. Now, there's a formidable domestic business in that space now, but that was really the opposite of what had happened with, say, the IR experience. So just bringing it back to an international level. I think also, just not to forget about the companies themselves. Online and bricks and mortar companies have now been either contracting or merging. We're starting to see, like we saw in the earlier days of consolidation in the industry, opportunistic co-opting of parts of the industry that are parallel but not 100% integrated. So the industries continue to bring entertainment and different forms of food and beverage and hospitality service into the tent, and now the industry is bringing online gaming into the corporate structure. And interestingly, as the OpCo, because these are operating entities that are coming together, they're starting to look at the real estate as a separate valuation. So now we have, for the last decade, really, the reintroductions of gaming-centric REITs and private equity real estate firms interested in accumulating gaming assets. And that's happening at a pace right now that I think is probably faster than most people take the time to notice.
So McDonald's has been doing that since the 70s, so it's good to see us catch up.
Everything we've discussed, a lot of it obviously still applies. But if we were looking at the history of modern gaming, it was all sort of going a certain way, and then we have an event like a global pandemic, which obviously did not just affect gaming; it affected everything. What's been affected by COVID-19 in gaming specifically, and has it accelerated some things that were already on the way and are much quicker now, and what things have actually maybe come out of this pandemic that wouldn't have happened otherwise? Brian, go to you with this one.
Well, I think we're still learning. We're only now really seeing facilities open back up in full force. There's a lot of discussion about whether there's been a sort of death knell for the buffet. I think broadly, I think casinos and resorts are going to look hard at their amenity profiles. What we've seen coming out of the pandemic is a quick rebound in the regional markets, which are more gaming centric and less amenity centric, and a slower recovery in the destination markets, which are more amenity centric. And so, something that may come out of this is a harder look at amenity sets and questioning the value of certain amenities as loss leaders. I think that, people are seeing margin improvement by taking a very targeted approach to marketing, because coming out of the pandemic, or even in the middle of the pandemic, once casinos could reopen, conceptually it was, hey guys, we just don't have the budget to market like we once did. Let's be extremely targeted, and the results were phenomenal. Part of that is going to be some pent up demand, and we're still trying to figure out how much of this is pent up demand versus sustainable demand. But yeah, I think we're going to see reduced amenities, reduced marketing, at least out of the gate. I think you're going to see companies getting smarter and more targeted. I think revenue management, so hotel yielding, in a similar vein, will improve once we sort of get back on track, and likewise in labor management. Although right now it's just a fantastic thing that everybody's back to work in the industry, or most people are starting to come back to work. Even the folks at Cirque du Soleil and the other entertainment companies that you sort of figured would be last back are coming back, slowly but surely, and so it's really great to see. And the other piece of this that I think about a lot is, we saw amazing online gaming growth during the COVID months, and that's natural, and anybody would have guessed that that's the direction it would have gone. And we'll be watching really closely to try to understand whether that is sustained, or whether we're going to see that revert back to the bricks and mortar side. I mean, Michael, how are you thinking about this?
Yeah. So, well, that's a good jump, a good transition to some of the things I was thinking about as you were talking about online. So, in addition to kind of finding stasis both on bricks and mortar and online revenue streams, the companies have used this relatively slow period from a business development standpoint to, I think, accelerate a lot of things that would have been done anyway. So again, continued collaboration between gaming, online, and bricks and mortar companies, and now with sports betting entering the fray, media companies and companies who used to shy away from gaming as a taboo industry are now buying advertising and sharing database value. So a lot of those things would have been happening, and there was the ability to kind of focus on them and refine them during COVID. So we saw that, but COVID, and this may start to bring us to some type of a conclusion of this type of a conversation, but we did have some knee-jerk reactions. Frankly, our first instinct upon COVID entering the fray was, let's measure the impacts. And then we started to look at the fact that when something's closed, that's a 100% impact. So in different markets, we're behaving differently. So as forecasters and feasibility analysts, at our core, our job was kind of, didn't have a lot of value to go project what's going to happen during COVID. it became a lot more important to look at what was going to happen after COVID. And now we're here. And the industry has been resilient again. And this is one of the things we started to look at in March and April of last year. How does this compare to following 9/11 when air traffic completely stopped? The industry was pretty resilient. The local markets and regional markets made up for what the destination markets couldn't handle. During the Great Recession, is the industry recession-proof? Well, there was the economy struggled, and there was a proportional delta in gaming, but not nearly what you saw in other discretionary income industries. And as properties opened, even with other alternatives available over time in entertainment, it's been very robust. So, when we opened the doors in gaming, it is true that movie theaters weren't open yet, and most restaurants weren't open. But now those things are opening up, and we're going to see where things go. Do they flatten? But certainly resilience has proven to be a characteristic in the industry again. So a logical follow-up is, again, looking at the industry more broadly from the ownership and the capital standpoint. Where's the capital? Where's it being invested? And so the industry has really been dominated by gaming-centric activity now for 3 decades. Despite the fact that we could have become absorbed into a technology industry, a lodging industry, a convention and meetings industry, by acquiring our amenity sets and our aligning with our providers on the equipment side and acquiring online and sports betting companies, we've protected the umbrella of the industry. And so one of the things we think about going forward, we have a new generation of players. We have all of these changing preferences to deal with, and some of them are more short-lived than others. I think everyone wants to know about skill games and esports, but we haven't quite figured out how it fits into the world of gambling yet. But the emergence of media companies again, not avoiding the industry, but actually starting to embrace it. Are they big enough to change that trend? Where gaming has been the big industry offering gaming, if you get into the conglomerates that really manage and invest behind media, and the conglomerates that have absorbed all of the different forms of media through digital now, do we survive it as a gaming industry? And I think that's a great way for Brian to kind of share his thinking and bring us to some type of a conclusion on this decade.
Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting question of where the money is coming from, and whether or not the partner companies with gaming companies now are large enough that we might see completely new paradigms in terms of who owns and operates gaming companies. I mean, the idea that you have this Bally Sinclair partnership, and you're going to have TV channels literally changing their names to reflect the name of a gaming company. We're very likely to see betting apps on smart TVs, better live betting, faster signals, because people will demand it. I mean, if people are streaming games, if you're betting live, you can't be a minute or 90 seconds behind live TV. Like, that doesn't work for live betting. So I think we're going to see innovation in the live betting space, in the technology space, even as it relates to something as simple and universal as just watching television. It's also really interesting to me the brand and the reach that these media companies have as it relates to customer acquisition, and that's a big part of the collaborations and acquisitions that have gone so far. And they're two ways, right? They're two-way acquisitions. We're seeing NBC acquire a piece of PointsBet, but we're also seeing a DraftKings acquire a VSiN. And so you're seeing media companies being smaller media companies, but media companies being rolled up into gaming operations, but also gaming operations, at least in part, being rolled into large media companies. I mean, it sort of begs a lot of questions, including, where ESPN as part of the Disney and ABC portfolio. You know, these guys just have massive reach and massive access to capital, and I think they have a real opportunity to be a game changer in the industry. So obviously something we'll be watching for years to come, I think.
Well, Michael and Brian, thank you for a ton of insight. We've looked through the history of modern gaming, but hopefully our conversation has maybe teed up what it might look like in the next few years. But obviously, we could be sitting here in 10 years, and it could all be completely different. But
let's not wait that long.
Absolutely not. Yeah. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us, gentlemen. And yeah, it was a pleasure to talk the industry in quite a broad view there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks.